Welcome to this video all about top-notch storytelling for your surveys. As a mystery shopper, you're giving a valuable and unique insight to a client about your experience with their organisation. By telling the story of your experience, you help the client understand how you felt, what you saw, what you heard, tasted, and even smelled, allowing them to really be there with you when they're reading your report. If you'd like to achieve great star scoring for storytelling, here are 4 things you can include in your survey. Let's have a look at each one. In your survey, you may write lots of information about what happened to you. And quite right too, the facts are vital. And it's also important to add how things made you feel and what you thought about them. For example, you may not get a call back from the organisation. Just writing "I didn't get a call back" doesn't really help. But if you think about how it made you feel as a customer, what it made you think about the organisation, that's interesting. Alternatively, you may note that the colleague gave great service. So what was it about that service? How did it make you feel? If it made you feel good, how would you describe that feeling? We'd always suggest thinking about yourself as a pretend customer. So if you were truly interested in their products or services, what would you feel? Here are some examples of words that you could use in your survey to describe your feelings. These help the client get a clearer idea about how their service makes you feel as a customer. So if you'd like to spice things up, you can always use a synonym checker or thesaurus to get the perfect words to describe your feelings well. Your survey can help the client make more sense of your experience if your storytelling helps them understand clearly how your experience felt. A great way to bring this to life is by thinking about how your 5 senses were stimulated during your visit. What did you see, and how could you describe it? This can apply to the location, or a website, or even an email. There can be a whole host of things within these items that you can see: marketing, photos, colours, people, body language, facial expressions, and so on. Try not to fall into the trap of assuming that the client knows that something is there, because they might not. Also, they may think something is obvious for their customers to see, but it isn't. You can help them understand this. Here are some example words you could consider to describe what you saw. What other words could you use? With an in-person shop or a recorded call, what did you hear? Think about the music, the colleague's voice, noise, atmosphere, chatter, tone of voice, their diction. So, how could you describe what you heard and how it made you feel? One thing to avoid here is mentioning accents. If you're shopping in person, maybe for clothing, in a gym or a restaurant, or anywhere you physically interact with the client, what could you feel with your hands and skin? How did the equipment feel? What was the atmosphere like? How did the water feel, the shower, the sauna, the temperature? Now, this is one that we don't often pay attention to, well, unless the smell is really nice or really unpleasant. But again, with an in-person shop, what could you smell? You can describe what you smelled and how it made you feel. Right, go careful here. We don't want you tasting the gym equipment or the cars, but mainly applicable to food and drink. You can really go to town with this sense. And also with other types of shop. What was your gut feeling? How did the service make you feel inside? If you're asked to describe people, in order to avoid causing offence, please stick with these key areas and no others. We must always remain factual. Never describe people by using race, ethnic appearance, size, or whether you thought they were attractive or not. Sometimes you're asked to give the location a score. It's usually from 0 to 10, about how the service overall made you feel. Generally, the scoring is based on a scale that looks like this. So when giving a score, make sure it's consistent with everything else that you've described in your survey. A couple of things to watch out for here. Make sure that you don't score the client down if your description contains nothing that you were unhappy about. Equally, don't score the client maximum if there are things in your survey that indicated it was poor. Never score a client 8 or 9 just because you don't ever score anybody 10. Don't score a client down because you thought that they were expensive or far away from your house. Commenting here on anything that the shop can't change isn't useful or constructive. Some examples of things we've seen to avoid here are you wish they had an outside pool, or you'd love them to have had soup on the menu, that sort of thing. And finally, add in an explanation to help them understand why you gave them the score you did. Remember, you're representing their customers, and this might sometimes mean that you're playing a role which is different to the real you. Now you might be thinking, blimey, there's so much to write, but don't worry, we don't want pages and pages of description with each answer. Think of these things as a checklist for when you're reviewing your survey. Ask yourself, have I really told the story of my experience here? And could I add in maybe one or two things to make sure my storytelling is great so I can give better insights to the client? Here's an example of a couple of paragraphs that use many of the principles we've talked about, and they consist of 55 words or less, and each one only took 90 seconds to write. So here's a reminder of the 4 key areas and a couple of top tips for each one to help you get 100% for storytelling every time. Remember, we don't want loads of content that gives very little real insight. We don't want waffle, we do want juicy storytelling. There you go, 4 areas you can work on to ensure you develop great storytelling skills and to help you deliver that quality insight which really helps our clients. If you have any queries or need any further help, please don't hesitate to contact your program coordinator or your project manager. For tips and best practice on the other 4 stars areas, have a look at our Shopper Academy. And finally, shoppers, thank you so much for what you do. It really matters. Thank you.